In our neighborhood, everyone knew Karen. She wasn't just the HOA president. She acted like she owned every square inch of the subdivision. If someone planted flowers she didn't like, she sent a notice. If a car was parked a little too close to the sidewalk, she threatened fines. Her clipboard was practically glued to her hand, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. I used to think she just wanted order, but over time it became clear Karen thrived on control. She lived for the chance to dictate what others could and couldn't do. When I had a pool installed in my backyard, it was supposed to be my sanctuary. I'd worked long hours for years, saving up for something that would finally bring a little joy and relaxation to my life. The contractors had barely finished pouring the last of the tiles before I caught Karen peeking through the fence like a hawk. She cornered me a day later while I was checking the water pump, her eyes gleaming in a way that set off alarms in my head. "Well," she said, "I think it's wonderful that you decided to add such a beautiful amenity for the neighborhood. It'll be nice for the families here to finally have a pool." I blinked, trying to process what she meant. "The neighborhood?" "Karen, it's my pool. For my family." Her smile tightened. Of course. But you know how our community work shared resources bring people together. And besides, you wouldn't want to come across as selfish, would you?" It took everything in me not to laugh in her face. She had this uncanny way of disguising demands as favors, wrapping them in faux politeness. I knew from the moment she said it that she already believed my pool belonged to the entire HOA, and she wasn't going to let go of the idea easily. Over the next week, I noticed her circling my house more than usual, pausing to stare at the sparkling water as if she were cataloging it for her personal inventory. A couple of neighbors even mentioned that she'd been hinting about community pool access in her conversations with them. That was when I realized Karen's obsession with my backyard wasn't just idle talk, it was the start of something bigger. Something I'd have to put a stop to before it spiraled out of control. Would you like me to expand Chapter 2 the same way, around 400 words, detailed and without a heading? Karen wasted no time escalating her nonsense. Just a few days after her thinly veiled suggestion, she marched right up to my front door with that trademark self-importance radiating from her. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head, she rang the bell like she was conducting official business. When I opened the door, she didn't even bother with small talk. "I've reviewed the HOA's bylaws," she began, as though she were reading from a sacred text. "And while it doesn't specifically mention pools, it does state that amenities must serve the community as a whole. Therefore, your pool will now be considered a shared resource." I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "Karen, that's absurd. I paid for the pool. It's on my private property. It's not an amenity, it's mine." Her lips curled into that condescending smile she always wore when she thought she was right. "You can interpret it however you like, but if you refuse to comply, we'll have to fine you for failing to cooperate with the association." I could feel my blood boiling. The sheer gall of this woman was unbelievable. It wasn't enough that she poked into people's flower beds or measured their trash cans. Now she was outright trying to steal my property under the guise of rules. What made it worse was how she started telling others about it. I overheard two neighbors chatting about how nice it'll be to have a pool for the kids this summer. When I asked where they got that idea, they admitted Karen had told them the HOA had arranged access. She was already spreading her little fantasy like it was official law. Some neighbors seemed relieved, finally thinking they'd get something out of all the fees they paid. Others just looked uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to get involved in another one of Karen's crusades. She had built a reputation for steamrolling anyone who stood in her way, and most people didn't dare challenge her. But I wasn't most people. This was my property, my money, and my peace she was messing with. As she walked off that day, smug as ever, I realized something important. Karen wasn't going to stop unless I made her stop. And when she finally pushed me to my limit, she was going to regret ever laying eyes on my pool. Would you like me to move on and expand Chapter 3 in 400 words too, keeping the same detailed and engaging style? Karen's delusion hit its peak when I found a bright, glossy flyer in my mailbox one morning. It was printed on neon paper with the HOA logo at the top, and the bold letters made my jaw drop. Grand opening HOA pool party hosted at my address. There it was, plain as day. She hadn't just claimed my pool in conversation. She had gone full dictator, announcing an event at my house without even asking me. The flyer promised snacks, music, and full pool access for all HOA members and their families. It even listed a start time and suggested people bring floaties. I stood there on my driveway, holding that ridiculous paper, and laughed out loud. The woman had completely lost her mind. Not only was she trespassing in spirit, but she had just invited the entire neighborhood into my private backyard. I could practically hear her voice bragging about it, how she'd secured a pool for the community, taking credit for something she didn't own. By the end of the day, I saw a few neighbors buzzing about the event. Some looked genuinely excited, while others shook their heads knowingly, muttering about classic Karen. That was when I knew I had two choices: confront her head-on and risk a screaming match that would only make her more determined, or play along and let her set herself up for the ultimate embarrassment. That night, the plan came to me, simple and brilliant. I wasn't going to yell or threaten. I wasn't even going to call a lawyer. I was going to let Karen's ego destroy her. If she wanted to throw a party at my pool, then she could accept there wouldn't be any water left for her guests to swim in. I ordered a heavy-duty pump and hoses, and 2 days before the so-called grand opening, I tested everything quietly. Then, the night before the big event, under the cover of darkness, I flipped the switch. The water began to drain, slowly but surely, until my once shimmering pool turned into nothing more than a sad, empty hole. By morning, it was bone dry, the tiles glistening with nothing but the memory of what had been there. As I looked over the drained pool, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Karen wanted a spectacle, and I was about to give her one. Just not the kind she imagined. Would you like me to expand Chapter 4 in 400 words now and wrap the story with Karen's meltdown and the satisfying ending? The morning of the so-called grand opening arrived, and I made sure to be out in the yard, casually sipping coffee, when the first cars started pulling up. Neighbors arrived in flip-flops and swimsuits, kids carrying towels and pool noodles, parents with coolers in tow. I watched the confusion spread as they looked from the flyer in their hands to the empty bone-dry pool behind me. Their faces were priceless, some puzzled, some amused, a few even embarrassed for believing Karen in the first place. And then came the star of the show. Karen strutted down the sidewalk like she was the queen of the block, a wide sun hat perched on her head, oversized sunglasses covering half her face, and a whistle hanging around her neck like she was the lifeguard in charge. She waved to the crowd, greeting people as though she owned the place. I swear she even shouted, "Welcome to your pool, neighbors," before she finally turned and saw the barren pit in my backyard. The transformation on her face was instant. Her jaw dropped, her smile collapsed, and then came the screech. What is this? Where's the water?" I took another calm sip of my coffee. "Oh, you mean my private pool?" "Yeah, I decided to drain it for maintenance. Didn't realize the HOA had scheduled a party here without asking me." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors outright snorted, while others covered their mouths, trying not to make it too obvious. Karen turned redder than I'd ever seen her. She stomped toward me, her sandals smacking the pavement like drumbeats. "You ruined this event. Do you know how long I spent organizing this? The community was counting on you to provide." "Funny," I replied. "I don't recall signing up to provide anything." It's my property, Karen. You don't get to claim it. Everyone here can see that now. For once, the neighbors didn't back her up. Instead, they nodded at me, muttered about how over the line she'd gone, and started gathering their kids. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Karen alone, fuming on the sidewalk with her whistle dangling uselessly. She tried to save face, sputtering about violations and selfish behavior, but the damage was done. The great HOA queen had been humiliated in front of her loyal audience. And the best part? She had no rule, no bylaw, and no authority to punish me. That empty pool wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a hole in Karen's reign of control. And watching her stomp away that day, I knew she'd never look at me or my property the same way again.